Hello and welcome to another fascinating video about Django REST framework on my channel. So, in one of the previous videos, what we did, we talked about the topic of uploading images to the Django REST framework application. And if you remember, if you have watched this video, you remember that what we did, we stored images in the media folder alongside with our Python code, so inside local file system, which is not a solution for production system, especially for large systems, because you need to have kind of like isolated file storages that are isolated from your application code, because everything is stored in the same folder as your code in our example. And for this, you need to have things like S3 compatible storage, or Azure storage, or DigitalOcean storage, or a normal FTP server. And in order to work with this, you could do this thing manually, but Django has a library that is called Django Storages. And Django Storages basically acts as a facade that allows us to easily plug different storages, different file storages like S3 compatible, Apache libcloud, Microsoft Azure storage, DigitalOcean, FTP, and SFTP, and even Dropbox as a file storage for your application. So you could use it for user uploaded data or for static files. In our case, we'll talk about user uploaded data. So Django Storages is a library that you should install to your application and use and configure using settings.py and use with different backends. So in our case, we'll talk about S3, which is most popular, especially today, most popular choice for storing files, both user uploaded and static files. And you could use this with AVS S3, or you could use this with any other S3 compatible storage. So if we go to the documentation for Amazon S3 backend, you could see that we actually need to install one more library, which is called boto3. And then we need to configure things. We need to configure file storage, and if you want also static file storage, we need to configure several variables such as access key and secret access key in order to access our server, and several others. So you could get all variables that are used by this backend here, and all configurations that is possible to do. We will not do precise like tweaking a configuration. We will rely on more or less default approach. So in next videos we'll talk about more in-depth usage of S3 and boto3, but in this video we'll keep things simple. So another library that we need is boto3, and basically it acts as AVS SDK for Python. So it's not only for storages, but also for different other APIs that are provided as part of AVS. So it's very easy to install as well. So you just need to install this library. We'll use Poetry in order to do this. No, we'll not use virtual inf and pip. Here we use Poetry to manage our dependencies in virtual environments. And the last thing that I would like to talk about is called S3 Ninja. And S3 Ninja is a demo S3 compatible server, which is used for development and testing purposes. Of course, it should not be used for real-life production. It could not be used for real-life production, but for testing things locally without a necessity to purchase a real S3 hosting, which is quite expensive, or to install other S3 compatible servers manually on your local machine, you could just run this S3 Ninja as a Docker container, and then you could use it to test most common operations. So there are some limitations that you could find here. So there are limitations, but for most use cases, for simple use cases, just for file operations, you could use this thing as well. So first thing first, let me go to my terminal and let me add a dependency that's called Django Storages. Poetry, add Django Storages. So I have already installed it, and another thing that I would like to install to my project is called boto3. So now we have these things installed, and let me just split my terminal and let me run this S3 Ninja. So let me just quickly go back to my browser, and you could see that we need to use this container from this image, from Docker Hub in order to obtain it locally. So how we could do it? Well, go back to the terminal and execute docker pull, and then we specify a name of the image and a tag which define a version. and you could see that actually I have already downloaded it. If you did not download it, you need to wait some time for downloading. And the final thing, let's go back to the terminal. You see we need to run this container in order to have this server running. So let's go there, and basically this S3 is just a normal Java application. So you could say that this is a Java application. So let's go back, and now we could access this server on a local host 9444, and don't forget that we need to use this UI path. And if you see here, we have several things generated for us. We have access key, we have a secret key, and we could create a bucket. So we called it Django examples. Let's create this bucket. Now we have this bucket, and we could start configuring our project to use S3 compatible storage. So let's see how we could do it and what we actually need to do. Okay, now let's start configure our project to use Django Storages and S3 compatible file storage. So what we need to do first, we need to add several environment variables. And because we use Django Environ library here in this project, we could specify them in this .env file, which is located in the main folder of our application. So let's go here and let's add several other variables. So the first variable that we need to introduce is called use S3, and we will make it true. And basically what this variable does, it will allows us to not for us but for our application to check if we should use S3 storage or we should use local file storage. So in a local testing environments, we could use both. We could use this S3 Ninja, or we could use file storage, especially for tests. When you deploy this application, you will also provide here credentials. And let's see what we need to do. Well, first thing first, we need to introduce what is called a key ID. We need to have also S3 secret access key. We need to have a bucket name, and finally we have S3 host. So these are variables that we should specify for our S3 storage. So let me go back to my browser, and you could see that we have several of this. Variables already generated by S3 Ninja application. The first thing is an access key. So let's copy it and let's go back to the VS Code. This is kind of like a key ID. Next thing is this secret key. So let's go back. And we also have created a bucket, as you remember, which is called Django examples. So let's go back and let's introduce it. S3 host would be an HTTP local host 9444, and this is kind of like a host that we are going to use. Next thing is to go to the settings.py file. So let's go to settings.py, and here we will introduce this. We need to introduce this S3 variable, and we also need to match between variables that are used by Boto. So we need to have the specific predefined variables by Boto, and we need to match them with these variables that we have in .env. So the first thing first, let me introduce here a variable called use S3, and this would be a boolean. So we need to precisely define it as a boolean, because by default Python interprets this values as a string, and because each of this string is not empty, they are all true by default, so we need to specify this as specifically as a boolean value. So we have here a name use S3, and default value would be false. Now we say if use S3. In this case, what we're going to use, this S3 compatible storage. So the first would be AVS access. Let me check my node. Access key ID. This is a name that is used by Boto3 by default. And here we say env. And the name in our case for this key ID is S3 key ID. S3 key ID. So another variable is called AVS secret access key. And just a small note, because here this variable starts with AVS, but you could use this library also with any other S3 compatible storage, as S3 Ninja here. So this is kind of like a names that are defined by Boto3, but it's not tied with AVS especially. So this library uses this kind of like name convention. So the next value is the secret access key. In our case, it's called S3 secret access key. Let me just copy it from here to avoid any typos. So let me just copy it here. Also, we need to have this AVS storage bucket name. In our case, it is called S3 bucket name. S3 bucket name. And finally, what we need to do, we need to specify also a host. So we call AVS custom domain. And as you remember, we have a library, we have a value that is called S3 host here. S3 host. We also need to get like a media URL, because as you remember, we have here a media URL, which is like used for local file system, but we need to define media URL also for using it with S3. So how we could do it? Well, media URL in this case would be we use this we use the syntax for formatted string. So we use this AVS custom domain, and then we use media. And finally, we need to specify default file storage, and this is a value that is used by Django Storages, not by Boto3. And in this case, we say storages, backends, S3 Boto3, S3 Boto, S3 storage. So this is the name for this storage implementation, and we need to put here S3 Boto3 here. Okay, so if we are not using this S3, we will use a local file storage. So in this case, we say default file storage is equal to storages, actually called Django core files storage file system storage. So this will be like a default file storage from Django itself. We also specify in this case a media URL from this, and we also have this media routes. Just copy these values here and paste them there. So now we have specified this this configuration for using Django Storages with S3 compatible storage. So what we will do next, let's run our application and let's upload some image. Let's upload an avatar for this application. So let's see how we could do it. Okay, so now we have implemented this configuration and we could start testing it. And for this, what we will do, we will use an Insomnia client and we will create a totally new user, and then we will upload an avatar to this user. And what I expect actually to have that the return value, the return URL for this avatar should actually include this S3 path. So it will not be stored in the media folder anymore. So let me go to my terminal and let me execute command that is called poetry run python manage.py run server. And immediately we have an error which states that media URL setting must end with a slash. So let me go back. And as you could see here that at least our configuration use S3 because this value actually is used, not this one. So let me just correct it and let me go back to my terminal and run this server again. So what I go now to Insomnia, let me just create a new user and I will call it let's say avatar email.com. So now we have this avatar email. So let me just copy to avoid any mistakes. Let me log in. And remember that we have here username because we use this Django REST framework obtain auth token function to do this. And now we have an error because we have a typo in the password. We have a token and let me change an avatar. So let me first add a new header, also authorization, and here we specify token. And now let me specify a new value here, which is called avatar, and it should be a file. And let me choose a file. So here I have my photo in Belgrade. This will be an avatar for my user. And now we have an error which states that the AVS access key ID that you provided does not exist in our records. Well, let me go to the VS Code and let me verify that actually we have here values from S3 Ninja. So what's wrong with this? Okay, so let me go to the Django Storages documentation and to Amazon S3, and let me validate that we have here an access key ID, we have a secret access key, and actually this is kind of what we actually have to, we need to have this S3 endpoint URL instead of custom domain. So let me just copy it and let me go to check my settings.py. So instead of custom domain, we use this value. So let me save it. Go back to my terminal. Everything is reloaded, and let me send this request again. And now, as you could see, we have this the full URL to our image. So it includes this localhost. It includes this bucket name. It also includes all paths that we actually have. But it also includes this AVS key ID that is used to temporarily access this image outside of our server. So let me go back to Chrome, and now if we go here, you see that this file is uploaded, and it's uploaded to the images avatars. This is a primary key, and this is a file name. So all what we did actually in the previous video when we specified the location. But if we go back to the VS Code again and we go to this DB SQLite, and remember that our user, if we go back to Insomnia, is called avatar email. So let me go to the users table, and here we have this avatar email, this one, the last one, and you see that the value of the avatar is actually images avatars, and then we have this string which is actually relative to locations that were specified in the settings.py. So nevertheless, if we have any kind of file storage, actually we have a relative URL stored in our database, which allows us to actually plug any kind of file storage implementation. And do not worry that actually here we will have a complete S3 file storage URL. No, we will have this relative URL that was specified relative to the media URL. So this is a way how we could specify this S3 storage using Django Storages library. So if you find this video useful for you, I encourage you to subscribe to my channel and share this video with your friends and colleagues, and subscribe for updates, because I regularly publish new videos on different software development topics, so you will notified with this about new video. So thank you for your attention, and see you soon.